A performance-based assessment to me is an opportunity for students to not just, show me their content knowledge, but also to practice soft skills like communicating, working with others, creating, team building experiences for them.
So I think I like to use performance-based assessments in my classroom because it allows students from all abilities to demonstrate their learning, not like a traditional test where some students get really nervous or anxious and it doesn't feel as authentic of who they are or what they know, like a performance-based assessment can be. I think a big thing sometimes with performance-based assessments, people go to thinking about those big projects, and that definitely is some of it, but it can also be just kind of everyday formative assessments that I'll use in my classroom. So, for example, like a raft, where students have to pick a role, an audience, and a topic that they want to kind of write about in different formats, and that could just be a 15-20 minute activity that we do in class.
The most difficult part of planning a performance-based assessment is making sure that when you're planning it, you are focused. And making sure that you're looking to see okay, what's the long-term trajectory? What's my goal with this? What do I want my students to get out of it? So that you're not just oh, this is cool, oh, that's fun, and throwing in too many things.
Here in Goochland, we have incredible resources, like our instructional coaches who have worked with me many times to create, find resources, find documents for the DBQ and things like that. So, I just always encourage people to talk with your colleagues, collaborate with people, and that's what makes the planning a little bit more enjoyable for the performance-based assessments.
Students who are so used to teachers who just give, multiple choice only, when they come to me, a lot of them are like, well, what's the answer? And I have to reiterate, there isn't one, You can remember dates and names and things like that, but the way that you perceive history and English changes based on your own perspectives. And so really giving that autonomy back to the kids and letting them know hey, it's not always going to be right, it's not always going to be wrong, but just doing your best and looking to find a solution is so important and so empowering for them.
I think by using performance-based assessments in the classroom, students are able to use those kind of skills that are a part of the profile of a Goochland graduate. They have to communicate, collaborate with each other, definitely critical thinking if they're analyzing primary and secondary sources, problem solving.
They're good for me to assess that content knowledge. It's good for me to assess, their critical thinking. And then, also with their communication, how did they speak this? Were they whispering it, hiding behind their computer? Were they confident about this? And some of it even comes back to that, civic responsibility piece of it, where, they're having to figure out how to work well with peers and, be a good coworker kind of thing.
I have had students last year, we did a performance-based assessment where they had to create a podcast about kind of a topic on the Industrial Revolution. And students to this day still come back to me and kind of say that that's the topic that they remember the most from my classroom. And I really believe it's because of that performance-based assessment. It really made them create an authentic, platform like a podcast to kind of demonstrate their learning.
It really opens up a lot of doors for them. They tend to talk a lot more. They come up with so many ideas that even surprise them.
Definitely a little bit more planning on the front end, but then when I'm in the classroom, I get to kind of have those authentic conversations with my students, going around, working with groups, working with the individual students. So it makes the teaching time so much more fun to me than kind of a traditional test or lecture.
Planning on, okay, what do I want them to do? I want them to learn this piece of the content by answering this question, okay? Which documents are gonna help them do that? Well, they gave me 45, but we don't have time for that, so I'm gonna pull out 2 from this side of the argument, 2 from this side of the argument, and one that's a little more ambiguous, get them thinking a little bit. And then once I've put all that together, okay, how am I going to order this? I need some sort of a hook to remind them of what we've already learned. I need to give them some background knowledge. Should I use, a Newsella article? Did it come with something? Should we use a textbook? Should we use a video? What's going to give them that information that they need to best be successful answering this question?
I usually start with kind of what do I want my students to do, those skills again. So if, I'm trying to have them have to defend something or argue something, kind of starting with what are the skills that I want them to master and be able to show, and then going from there, kind of finding, okay, what are the resources, or in social studies we use a lot of primary and secondary sources, so what are some good sources that would get students to kind of have those skills come out of the sources, if that makes sense. And then, creating the actual assessment is, what is the rubric? What are students going to do? And kind of laying out the project for the students.
My biggest focus with teaching history is making sure that they are able to look at something like a historical document. Can they understand it? Can they pull out the meaning? Okay, it ends up being more of an English lesson sometimes of okay, what's the main idea? Do you understand what their purpose is, or what their bias is, and things like that. And having them be able to understand those things and pull out their own ideas and their own thoughts and formulate their own opinions is so much more important to me than remembering dates and names, especially because at the end of the day, they can Google those things later in life. I'd rather them be able to be presented with new information and either find they've changed their mind, or go out and help educate other people.